Imagine moving to a new city, only to realize everyone else had the same idea. Canada is famous for welcoming immigrants, but some cities are now bursting at the seams. From skyrocketing rent to packed public transit, these places are feeling the pressure. Which city is the most overcrowded? Where do immigrants struggle the most? And is there still room for new arrivals? Stick around as we count down the 10 Canadian cities overflowing with immigrants, with surprising stats, crazy real estate prices, and jaw-dropping facts you won't believe. Think your city made the list? Let's find out. Number 10. Quebec City. Quebec City. Now, when people think of immigration hotspots in Canada, this city doesn't usually come to mind. But, surprise! Over the past few years, the French-speaking capital of Quebec has been quietly welcoming thousands of immigrants, especially from France, Algeria, Morocco, and Haiti. It's like a mini Europe in North America, with its cobblestone streets and historical vibes. The province of Quebec has its own immigration system, separate from the rest of Canada. They focus heavily on French-speaking newcomers, which is why over 90% of immigrants here can speak French. But there's a catch. If you don't know the language, life can be tricky. Quebec has strict language laws like Bill 101, which requires most businesses and schools to operate in French. So if you're thinking of moving here, start practicing your bonjour and merci right away. But don't let the language barrier scare you away. Quebec City is one of the most affordable major cities in Canada. The average rent for a one-bedroom apartment is around 1,200 Canadian dollars. That's way cheaper than Toronto or Vancouver. Plus, Quebec offers some of the best healthcare and education systems in the country, with tuition fees for international students being much lower compared to other provinces. The city's economy is strong, with booming industries like technology, video game development, and tourism. Companies like Ubisoft have offices here, creating thousands of jobs in gaming and animation. And let's talk about safety. Quebec City consistently ranks as one of the safest cities in Canada, with crime rates significantly lower than places like Toronto or Montreal. But is Quebec City really overcrowded? Well, not in the way you'd expect. It's not as packed as Toronto, but the immigrant population has doubled in the last 2 decades, and the demand for housing is rising. This means that while it's still a great place to settle, it's getting busier by the year. Number 9. Kitchener-Waterloo, Ontario. Kitchener-Waterloo, a place that's exploding with immigrants, and for good reason. If you've never heard of this area before, let me put it this way. It's like Canada's Silicon Valley. The city is a tech powerhouse, home to giant companies like Google, Shopify, BlackBerry, and OpenText. And guess what? Over 30% of the population here is made up of immigrants, mostly from India, China, and the Middle East. So why is everyone rushing to Kitchener-Waterloo? Jobs, jobs, and more jobs. This place is a goldmine for tech workers, engineers, and anyone in the STEM fields. The University of Waterloo is one of the best tech schools in the world, and it produces top talent that companies are fighting over. In fact, the school has been called the MIT of Canada because of its cutting-edge research. Tech giants love hiring from here, and a lot of international students stay back after graduation because they land high-paying jobs. The median salary in Kitchener-Waterloo is 75,000 Canadian dollars per year, which is higher than the national average of around 65,000 Canadian dollars. Tech jobs here can easily pay 100,000 Canadian dollars plus per year, making it one of the best cities in Canada to build a career. But here's the downside. Housing prices are skyrocketing. A few years ago, you could buy a house here for 400,000 Canadian dollars. Now, the average home price has shot up to 750,000 Canadian dollars. Even rent isn't cheap. A one-bedroom apartment costs around 2,000 Canadian dollars per month. With the population growing rapidly, the city is starting to feel the pressure. Traffic congestion is increasing, and housing shortages are becoming a real issue. Despite that, Kitchener-Waterloo still offers an amazing quality of life. It's got a great mix of urban life and nature with parks, hiking trails, and even Oktoberfest, the biggest Bavarian festival outside of Germany. So, while it's getting crowded, the job market, high salaries, and quality of life keep drawing immigrants in. Just be prepared to fight for a place to live. Number 8. Hamilton, Ontario. Okay, Hamilton is blowing up right now. It used to be this gritty, steel-producing city that no one really paid attention to. But fast forward to today, and it's one of the fastest-growing immigrant hubs in Ontario. Why? Because Toronto is way too expensive. So, immigrants are moving to Hamilton in massive numbers. In fact, over 27% of the city's population are immigrants, mostly from India, the Philippines, China, and the Middle East. The biggest reason people are choosing Hamilton? Affordability. Or at least, it used to be. A few years ago, you could buy a house here for around 350,000 Canadian dollars. But now, it's pushing 800,000 Canadian dollars. That's a massive jump, and it's because people are leaving Toronto and coming here instead. Even rent is climbing. A one-bedroom apartment will cost you around 1,900 Canadian dollars per month. But housing aside, Hamilton has a lot to offer. It's got a growing tech sector, healthcare jobs, and manufacturing opportunities. McMaster University is one of Canada's top schools, attracting thousands of international students every year. The city is also becoming a hub for healthcare professionals, with Hamilton General Hospital and St. Joseph's Healthcare being major employers. And let's talk about nature. This place has over 100 waterfalls. It's called the waterfall capital of the world. And if you love the outdoors, Hamilton is a dream. There's also a huge arts and culture scene growing, with tons of festivals, music events, and street markets. But is Hamilton overcrowded? Absolutely. The population has exploded in the last decade, and infrastructure is struggling to keep up. Traffic congestion has increased by 30%, and public transport is nowhere near as good as Toronto's. The city is trying to build more homes, but demand is just too high. Number 7. Winnipeg, Manitoba. Winnipeg, it's probably the most underrated immigrant city in Canada, and honestly, people sleep on it way too much. Sure, it's cold, like minus 40 degrees Celsius in winter kind of cold, but immigrants are still moving here in huge numbers. In fact, Winnipeg has one of the highest per capita immigration rates in Canada. Nearly 25% of its population are immigrants, and the biggest groups come from the Philippines, India, Nigeria, and China. The Manitoba Provincial Nominee Program, MPNP, is one of the best immigration programs in Canada, making it super easy for newcomers to settle here. Unlike Ontario and BC, where you have to wait years for permanent residency, Manitoba fast-tracks skilled workers. So why Winnipeg? One word: affordability. You can still buy a house here for around 350,000 Canadian dollars, which is dirt cheap compared to Toronto's 1.2 million Canadian dollars. Even rent is low. A one-bedroom apartment costs around 1,200 Canadian dollars per month. That means immigrants can actually afford to live well here without being broke. But it's not just about cheap housing. Winnipeg has a surprisingly strong job market, especially in healthcare, education, agriculture, and manufacturing. Plus, the city has one of the lowest unemployment rates in Canada, hovering around 4%. That means if you're looking for work, your chances of getting hired are pretty high. And let's talk about culture. Winnipeg is insanely diverse. The Filipino community here is one of the biggest in Canada, and every summer the city hosts Folklorama, the largest multicultural festival in the world. There are over 40 cultural pavilions, representing countries from all over the globe. But there's a reason why not everyone is moving here. The winter is brutal. If you've never experienced minus 40 degrees Celsius with wind chill that makes your face hurt, Winnipeg might not be for you. Crime rates are also higher than the national average, but it really depends on which area you live in. So, is Winnipeg overcrowded? Possibly yes. And the immigrant population is booming, and housing demand is going up fast. If you don't mind the cold, Winnipeg is one of the best places for immigrants looking for affordable housing and job opportunities. Number 6. Ottawa, Ontario. Ottawa, Canada's capital city and one of the best places for immigrants to settle. But here's the catch. It's getting seriously packed. Almost 30% of Ottawa's population is made up of immigrants, and that number keeps climbing every year. Why? Well, Ottawa is the political heart of Canada, home to Parliament Hill, embassies, and government offices. This means thousands of job opportunities in public administration, law, and tech. And speaking of tech, Ottawa is actually one of Canada's biggest tech hubs, often called Silicon Valley North. Major companies like Shopify, Nokia, and IBM have offices here, and the demand for IT workers is insane. In fact, the tech sector employs over 80,000 people, many of whom are immigrants. Another reason immigrants love Ottawa? High salaries. The median household income is around 100,000 Canadian dollars per year, which is higher than the national average. But here's the issue: housing is becoming a serious problem. The cost of buying a home has jumped to 750,000 Canadian dollars, and rent for a one-bedroom apartment is now around 2,200 Canadian dollars per month. That's a huge increase from just a few years ago. But let's talk about lifestyle. Ottawa has one of the highest standards of living in Canada. It's super safe, ranked as one of the cleanest cities in the world, and has tons of green spaces like the Rideau Canal, which freezes into the world's largest skating rink in winter. Plus, it's got a huge multicultural scene, with neighborhoods like Chinatown and Little Italy buzzing with diversity. The downside? It's not as exciting as Toronto or Vancouver. Ottawa has a reputation for being a bit quiet. If you're looking for crazy nightlife, this might not be your city. Also, winters here are brutal, with temperatures dropping below -30 degrees Celsius. So, is Ottawa overcrowded? Yes, especially in the housing market. Immigrants are pouring in and the city is struggling to keep up with demand. But if you can handle the cold and don't mind a more peaceful city, Ottawa is an amazing place to build a life. Number 5. Edmonton, Alberta. Edmonton, one of Canada's fastest-growing cities for immigrants. If you've never considered it before, you might want to now. Over 26% of Edmonton's population are immigrants, and the numbers keep rising. So, why are so many people moving here? One word: jobs. Edmonton is the economic powerhouse of Alberta, thanks to oil, gas, construction, and manufacturing. It's also home to major companies like Enbridge, Suncor, and Canadian National Railway. Plus, healthcare and education are booming too, with places like the University of Alberta and Alberta Health Services offering thousands of jobs every year. The median salary in Edmonton is 85,000 Canadian dollars per year, which is way higher than the Canadian average. The cost of living? Way cheaper than Vancouver or Toronto. You can buy a detached house for around 450,000 Canadian dollars, which is almost half the price of a home in Toronto. Even rent is reasonable, with a one-bedroom apartment costing around 1,500 Canadian dollars per month. But there's something else that makes Edmonton unique. It has one of the youngest populations in Canada. The average age here is just 36, meaning it's full of energy, innovation, and opportunity. Plus, it's home to one of the biggest immigrant communities from the Philippines and Canada, along with large populations from India, China, and Nigeria. However, Edmonton isn't perfect. The winters here are no joke. Expect temperatures to drop to -35 degrees Celsius and snow that lasts 6 months. Another downside? The crime rate is slightly higher than the national average, but it really depends on which area you live in. So, is Edmonton overcrowded? Not yet, but it's getting there. The population has grown by over 15% in the last decade, and housing demand is increasing fast. But if you're looking for an affordable city with tons of job opportunities and a high quality of life, Edmonton is one of the best places in Canada to move to. Number 4. Calgary, Alberta. Calgary, one of the fastest-growing cities in Canada and a hotspot for immigrants. More than 33% of the city's population are immigrants, making it one of the most diverse places in Alberta. Why are so many people moving to Calgary? Simple: high salaries and low taxes. Alberta is the only province in Canada with no provincial sales tax, PST, which means you get to keep more of your money. Plus, Calgary has one of the highest median household incomes in the country, around 110,000 Canadian dollars per year. But what really draws immigrants here? Oil and gas. Calgary is home to companies like Suncor, Shell, and Cenovus Energy, which create thousands of jobs every year. But even outside of oil, Calgary's economy is booming, with growing sectors like finance, technology, and construction. If you work in IT, engineering, or business, this city is a goldmine. Housing? Way more affordable than Toronto or Vancouver. You can buy a house for around 600,000 Canadian dollars, and rent for a one-bedroom apartment is around 1,800 Canadian dollars per month. That's still cheaper than most big cities in Canada. Calgary is also known for its amazing quality of life. The city is right next to the Rocky Mountains, which means you get breathtaking views, fresh air, and some of the best hiking and skiing in the world. The city is also famous for the Calgary Stampede, a huge festival that attracts millions of visitors every year. But there are a few downsides. Calgary's weather is unpredictable. One day it's sunny, the next day there's a snowstorm. And while the city is growing fast, public transportation isn't great, so you'll probably need a car to get around. So, is Calgary overcrowded? Yes, in some areas. The immigrant population is growing so fast that housing prices are starting to rise, and traffic congestion is becoming a problem. But overall, Calgary is still one of the best cities for immigrants, offering high salaries, affordable housing, and an incredible quality of life. Number 3. Montreal, Quebec. Montreal, the city of poutine, festivals, and a unique European charm right in the heart of Canada. But while it's a dream destination for many, it's also becoming overcrowded with immigrants. Right now, over 23% of Montreal's population is foreign-born, and every year, thousands more arrive. One of the main reasons? Affordability. Compared to Toronto and Vancouver, Montreal is way cheaper. You can rent a one-bedroom apartment for around 1,600 Canadian dollars per month. And if you're looking to buy a home, the average price is about 550,000 Canadian dollars, which is a steal compared to other big cities. That's why many newcomers, especially from France, Algeria, Haiti, China, and Morocco, choose Montreal as their new home. But here's the thing. Language is a big deal here. Quebec has strict French language laws, meaning most jobs require you to speak at least basic French. If you don't, your job options can be limited. However, if you work in IT, engineering, finance, or the arts, you'll find plenty of opportunities. The AI sector is booming in Montreal, with companies like Google and Facebook investing millions into tech here. Culturally, Montreal is like no other city in North America, with its old European-style streets, crazy nightlife, and world-famous festivals like the Montreal Jazz Festival and Just for Laughs. There's always something happening. Plus, foodies love it here. Montreal has the most restaurants per capita in Canada. But let's talk about the downside. Public transportation is struggling. The metro is old, buses are often delayed, and traffic is a nightmare. Also, winters here are brutal, with temperatures dropping to minus 20 degrees Celsius or lower, plus endless snowstorms. So, is Montreal overcrowded? Yes, especially in rental markets. The demand is high, and landlords are hiking up prices fast. But if you can handle the French language requirement and the cold winters, Montreal offers a unique and vibrant life that's hard to beat. Number 2. Vancouver, British Columbia. Welcome to Vancouver, where the mountains meet the ocean and where your wallet cries. This city is stunning, has one of the highest qualities of life in the world, and is a top choice for immigrants. But here's the problem. It's insanely expensive, and it's getting overcrowded fast. Right now, about 42% of Vancouver's population are immigrants, making it one of the most diverse cities in Canada. People from China, India, the Philippines, and Iran have been flocking here for decades, drawn by the city's mild climate, beautiful landscapes, and strong economy. But let's talk about housing, because this is where things get crazy. Vancouver has the most expensive real estate in Canada. The average price of a home? Over 1.2 million Canadian dollars. And if you're renting, get ready to pay at least 2,700 Canadian dollars for a one-bedroom apartment. These prices are pushing many middle-class immigrants out to nearby cities like Surrey, Burnaby, and Richmond. The job market is solid, especially in tech, film, tourism, and finance. Vancouver is a major hub for Hollywood movies. It's nicknamed Hollywood North. And big companies like Amazon, Microsoft, and EA Games have offices here. But salaries don't match the high cost of living. Even professionals making 80,000 Canadian dollars per year struggle with rent and basic expenses. Culturally, Vancouver is a paradise. You've got world-class hiking, skiing, and beaches, plus an incredible food scene with the best sushi in Canada, thanks to its huge Japanese population. It's also one of the most eco-friendly cities in the world, with tons of green spaces, bike lanes, and a strong focus on sustainability. But there's a downside. Vancouver's infrastructure is struggling to handle its rapid growth. Traffic congestion is a nightmare, the public transit system is packed, and housing affordability is a huge crisis. Plus, if you're looking for nightlife, Vancouver is surprisingly quiet compared to Toronto or Montreal. So, is Vancouver overcrowded? Absolutely. Housing is nearly impossible to afford, and the demand keeps rising. But if you can handle the cost, there's no better place in Canada for nature lovers and outdoor enthusiasts. Number 1. Toronto, Ontario. And finally, we've made it to Toronto, the most overcrowded immigrant city in Canada. If you live in Canada, you probably already knew this was coming. Over 47% of Toronto's population are immigrants, making it the most diverse city in the country and one of the most multicultural places in the world. Why do so many people move to Toronto? It's Canada's economic powerhouse. Toronto has the biggest job market in the country, with major industries like finance, technology, healthcare, media, and business. It's home to the headquarters of major companies like RBC, TD Bank, Shopify, and Bell Media, offering thousands of high-paying jobs. But here's the biggest issue: housing. Toronto's real estate market is out of control. The average price of a home is over 1.1 million Canadian dollars, and even renting a one-bedroom apartment costs around 2,600 Canadian dollars per month. That's why so many people are moving to nearby cities like Mississauga, Brampton, and Markham, which are also overcrowded with immigrants. Toronto is also one of the fastest-growing cities in North America, with over 100,000 new immigrants arriving every year. This has put massive pressure on public transportation, hospitals, and schools. The subway system is old and constantly breaking down, and traffic congestion is a nightmare. But despite all this, people still love Toronto. The city has endless entertainment options, amazing food, and one of the most exciting nightlife scenes in Canada. You can find Chinatown, Little Italy, Greektown, Koreatown, and more, all in one city. And let's not forget the Toronto Raptors, CN Tower, and world-famous festivals like Carabana. The weather? It's unpredictable. Winters can be freezing, but summers are hot and humid. And while crime exists, like in any big city, Toronto is still considered one of the safest major cities in North America. So, is Toronto overcrowded? 100% yes. Housing is expensive, traffic is insane, and the city keeps growing. But for immigrants, it's still the land of opportunity. If you can afford it, Toronto offers endless possibilities and a vibrant lifestyle.